So here's a demographic that you can run into in life, and that's called disgruntled nationalists. Now, just hold up, because there's a lot of reasons to be disgruntled, and there's a lot of reasons to be a nationalist. And it's understandable. Within limits, I wouldn't say it's good. Now, of course, disgruntledness is not good. See, that's what I want to divide. The nationalist part is good to a limit. If it reaches hypernationalism, it's bad. If you don't have any nationalism, it's bad. You just have people, random people. You can see these types of situations in refugee camps or something, where it's not just one tribe, it's a mix of tribes. I think weird organizations like NGOs do that. It's very alienating. Every man for himself type of situation. It's very unnatural. Very strange. If anyone's lived in one of those, it would be interesting to hear your insights about what type of rat experiments they're engaged in on a human level. But in any case, you know what's good, what's cool, what's chill is when you have a bunch of people just like you, more or less, all around you all the time. Places like Sweden were like that before these people got to work on it. But of course, all of these bad policies can be reversed and engineered. It's just they tried to do it. Now in France, it's a really bad situation and has been for years. So the reversal might be a little bit more difficult, but from what I hear, it's already isolated pockets. So it really is just a matter of management, bringing the right stuff to the right place in the right way, and then having a plan for what to do with what's left over. And it's the same way, I guess, in the Balkans or anywhere else where there's been massive breaches of public security. Because that's essentially what it is if the nationalists are disgruntled, disunited, and disillusioned to the point that some type of opposing force, even if it's not organized or appears to be organized, can just de facto overrun a landscape that's denuded of people anyway because of the civic desertification that took hold because of orchestrated parties and policy decisions. See, the only policy they need to come up with is one that doesn't work enough, is too slow, right? A day late and a dollar short. They just come up with different variations of that. That's the face of political sabotage, which is sabotage of leadership. And then, of course, across all of the civilian areas, not just military. Can't have a military if the electricity don't work, or factories don't work, or you got no security. You can't. If you do have one, it really doesn't matter. It's just people that haven't hit the dirt yet because they don't got the logistics. So they're going to give up at some point. At least the latest when the water truck doesn't arrive, or there's something stinky in it that makes everyone sick. So this is the game they're playing. This is their level. This is not the level that the West wanted to go to. Why would it? Like, who wants bad things? But they want bad things for us, and they've showed their hand, so to speak, but not directly. It's indirectly. They got a wall of explanations for what they do. That's their job, is making up explanations. Creating realities on the ground like cement that's properly mixed and put in the proper place at the proper time in the proper way. That they're not about that. They're much more advanced than making working things. In that they just pretend to be that person that in fact creates chaos and also a lot of graft for side business. Oh, this be the government property here, so let's sell that off. We need to balance our budget. They sell it to a friend for 1% of its value. It's just like a paper transaction. Friend can sell it directly to a scrapyard for 20 times that amount, and they split the proceeds. I guess that's how it works. So, okay, there's no perfect governmental system, but when it comes to the point of compromising national security, not just practically, tactically, but also strategically, then you're talking about a complete failure to manage a nation effectively. So, but here's the thing. Think of the nation as a body. You can have a bad foot wound that does limit your performance, but you can still function in some ways. You can also remedy, you can devote some time to healing the broken foot, for example, like maybe more time than you would have devoted before it was broken type of situation. But because you're flexible, dynamic, and not brooding on mistakes of the past, but moving forward, not just with healing, but also adapting to new circumstances, such as surprising turns of events. and not dramatizing things, overly dramatizing or overly awfulizing things, but keeping it, more downplaying it. Like, last night there were 10 air defense missiles that blew up. This morning it's just 2, so I'm feeling real good about my chances of not having a gigantic piece of shrapnel brain me type of optimism. Because the weird thing is you can do that. That's what human beings are built for, is adapting to new normals that one didn't think would be normal, but in fact it's normal. So now it's not normal to think in terms of 10-year plans, but guess what? That's better. The bad circumstances forced you to abandon that naive conception of time, which is delusional. And it's made it a lot more visceral. You've got right here, right now, you've got today. You don't have 2 weeks. You don't have a week. You might not have 3 days. You might not have 5 minutes. So don't bother yourself about the future. The future is a trap. You don't know. Everyone says it. Who's got the crystal ball? Who can say this will be so? So many deluded, greedy, and hateful people running around in a big circle. Who's going to call that dice roll? Roll the dice. Because that's usually, let me tell you, usually all of them lose. Which is why wise people don't go that way, because they know the results of it are not usually good, and yet being forced to fight, that sometimes it's just unavoidable. In that case, you should skillfully fight. It's not skillful to just give yourself up to bandits, although blowing with the wind is a good strategy, good tactic. You can also go on the offensive by retreating. You can do that too. Walk backwards. There's different ways of doing it, but finally it's not about winning or losing, it's about spiritual resilience. It's about the winning moment. It's about freedom and liberation from defilements. It's about continuity of good things, good places, good people, good thoughts, good words. So, but coming back to the point at hand, the whole point was an investigation of disgruntled nationalists. Now, that's a whole different story. These are people that believe themselves to be patriotic, but because they've sort of separated themselves from the concept itself in a meaningful way, they're doing all different types of crazy stuff. But finally, at the end of the day, the bigger mouths among them, not the useful idiots below them, is they're getting a paycheck somehow. a kick is coming in somewhere, and they're doing it for the money that everybody else working. That's their modus operandi. You took a job at the oil filter shop. They took that job, just reading a line of BS for a specific audience, tailored to them to be misleading. And every day they come out with new BS, like why what they're doing makes sense, but the other stuff doesn't make sense. More or less a slick version of the other side's talking points, just delivered via a different demographic. That's what they're doing. So that's why you're plugged into these influencers. You're in a dumb place, and you're in for a dumb ride. Popular people, man, a lot of them super vulgar, super stupid, and following those types of people around, you get more of the same. There is a saying: the people you keep company with, that does sort of define you. That's your crew. If your crew is not on point, you got people looking wacky and acting wacky. You're wacky. You're whack for sticking around. So people that are surrounded by crazy people bounce. You know, this is what the Buddha said. The Buddha said, do not reform dumb people. He said, avoid them. Avoiding the foolish is wise. It's really, really good, because all that foolishness that they can create in that big 360 ball of stupidity around them, that's just limited to where they find themselves or their space. Now, I pity the fools that have to live with fools, or think they do, or there's nothing convenient at the time, that there is a comma in that, there is a causality in that some of it's unavoidable. But I recommend bouncing if you can, keeping your eyes peeled and doing it skillfully, not just taking the next barge, although maybe that's the only way out. So people can get better and people can get worse. And if people get worse, it's best not to be dependent on people. Although I must say, I've been pleasantly surprised throughout my life with the integrity of the people with which I've come into contact with, which is why all this awfulizing about all of these things is not helpful, nor is it accurate. Like these types of games have been played all different times and all different places. Again, all of their terribleness does not mean they will succeed. In fact, it rather suggests that they won't. Who wants to live under such a terror regime? So what they're trying to build is going to fall apart one way or another. It's just you have the in-the-moment profiteers that sold themselves maybe on something they thought would be an easier gig, and then all of a sudden the heat gets turned up and these people bounce. You don't want to be in a hairy situation where you got your neck on the line, you're getting paid even if it is six figures. When stuff goes south, you don't want to be that person having to answer questions why there's a gigantic hole in the border fence. That is a bad gig. But again, you got some people that got fast mouths and fast hands and know some people, and they just think it's going to go on as business as usual as the heat turns up. But those are the last people standing with the musical chairs. All the chairs disappear at once, or more than one at once, and then some real chaos starts breaking out in the ranks. So, but again, coming back to with compassion towards disgruntled nationalists, man, I understand you, okay? I understand disgruntlement, which is why I've devised this whole practice to get over that. Not just that, just over everything, but that when you're getting just run over, everything, not just you, all the things you like and love, like freedom of the press, like civic societies, like flourishing communities, all those things you love, you get to watch those get run into the dirt. I understand. what disgruntlement feels like. But you need to understand, take a longer view. Like retreat, regroup, rethink, reposition, and also put it in historical context. Just because we thought it couldn't happen didn't mean it couldn't, and it did, and now it's just the way it is. Your ship's half sunk, it's leaning. That's your ship, you're stuck on it, so it's sink or swim, and I mean, swimming isn't always the best option. So maybe it is salvageable, maybe a part of it's salvageable, maybe there's stuff on deck you can use, put together in a raft, and then there's maybe equipment you can use. Look at that axe sitting right there, it's even rusty. But that thing will do in a pinch, especially when you're on a deserted island. If you make it to that deserted island, which you will make it to it, if it's the right circumstances, and if it's not, that's common, right? You're not going to make it every time. But at least you're not going to go into the next life not thinking that you didn't put in your wisest, best effort, not the hysterical and disgruntled effort. Ending on a disgruntled note, hell no. It's not the way I'm exiting stage left. When that curtain falls, my last scene is triumphant. Not going out with a whimper, not going out with a bang. Triumphant, not disgruntled. It's important to realize that part of the political pathogens that we're dealing with today are a combination of different bad beliefs that are self-reinforcing. So first off is materialism, which is to say, second is nihilism, and third, well, we'll get to that in a moment, but just think for a second. So the nihilism, this gives them a criminal short-term mentality. I'm going to win this election by cheating, and I'm going to do it every time. That's a very, let's say, understandably vulgar opinion to have, but it doesn't lead to good outcomes because these people are not the best leaders. So their willingness to use criminal means to co-opt political processes leads to atrophying socioeconomic conditions over time. Absolutely. So, but again, materialism. So what their values are also involved in this because it's about enriching themselves. So at the cost of others. So they're willing to make that deal. So also brutality. Yeah, so brutality towards others, like they don't feel amorality. So they think that again is some type of superpower, but in fact it's something that leads to a long-term breakdown of trust or a loss of reputation. Or how about this, a reputation for being a bad person, a bad actor. That's very injurious. So then they have to counteract that process on the informational side, which also means having people that can communicate lies effectively and in an organized fashion. So they need cadres of as many as they can get of those that can write fake scripts and think up bad things and be sadistic. So they have a sadistic brutality within their matrix of I don't know if you don't want to call them skills, but they're the pathogenic qualities that make them effective. So when for example poison is going through like your liver or something, you could break it down to organic chemical compounds, and then you could watch the reaction take place, and you'll see, well, yes, if you put poison into someone's liver, it's going to lead to liver failure and then to their death. It's the causality of the interaction of chemicals with human organs. Sadistic amorality, that's pretty potent. That's pretty pungent or potent. There you go. It's potent in killing things, like killing off good culture, a good opponent, the good opponent to your smash and grab schemes, because that's something. Also break it down to that, it's them smashing and grabbing something that doesn't belong to them by right of their capability in the other areas, such as, how about being a good person? Ultimately, that's what a leader should be, and if a politician is a leader, that's what a politician should be. A politician should be a good person. There's this whole, oh, we tolerate corrupt people. No, if you're corrupt, you don't belong in politics. And if it's exposed, guess what? You should be thrown out of politics. Now, will this keep happening? Yes, because we're dealing with the human dimension, but there are effective systems for dealing with it, and there's less effective. And if you have a bunch of corrupt people, it's going to lead to bad times for the majority of the citizenry. That's just the way it is. Now, again, a lot of this has to do with causality. A lot of this has to do with this people doing this bad thing, those people doing that bad thing, and over time it accumulates. I get that. But ultimately, there's also no such thing as a permanent death throw of culture. Even if we talk now of a globalized Western culture, it's adaptable. It knows it's not going to lose its qualitative sense on any level, especially not the political or leadership levels. Why do Western factories run good? Because there's better leadership. You know what? They chose this material, not that material. They chose to do it this way, not that way. They chose to do it here because it's better there than there. Good leadership is not, oh, I won a stinky election, a thrown election, and now I'm the leader. No, that's not it at all. No, it is the results of the undertaking. So you have civil unrest or mass poverty in the richest country on earth. It's not an achievement to be a politician or a leader in a system like that. It's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. And people that are discredited and disgraced, what's the result of that? So, but then again, see, you're dealing with them on some aversionary level, and I don't recommend doing that. It's just depersonalize it. Don't put faces to these principles, although you can keep to the principles. It's about doing things well versus not doing things well. But yes, they have an effective, let's say, antisocial principles. And it keeps them dealing with things with impunity, with a certain brutal sadism and one-wayism sort of baked into it. Oh, deception. If you're an amoral person, they go all in on deception or also on rhetorical games. Like, oh, my opponent appears to be more credible to me by using this argument, so let me take that argument or that label, let me apply it to myself so I own that position, and then I'm going to reverse his argument rhetorically, and I'm going to apply it to him. This is what they believe to be accomplished executions or accomplished ways of doing things. But people have comparisons. If they don't totally control the information sphere, people can, especially people on the ground, like real people, can shoot all different types of holes in this type of blimpery. So let's also not forget their capacity to live in an alternative reality. That's, I would say, it's not an accomplishment at all, but they have no problem living in fantasy land, where everything they do is justified, self-rationalized. They feel that to be the best place for them. So they stay there, and they have people that reinforce the idea that everything they're doing is perfectly congruent with their desires and cravings. And because it's perfectly congruent with their desire and cravings, and they're not something that they question or have to explain because they're a special type of something, because they really have a narcissistic way about them as well. I am me, therefore I can do anything. Again, which leads to impunity. So also, I would say no one people or one leadership class is necessarily doomed to this type of personality disorder. But their system filters their entire population for the most potent personalities of this type. So, and they think that's what makes them strong. So it's rather inversionary. See, a lot of it has to do with alternative realities. So they're not interested in, they only interact with you on the deceptive plane. So they identify you as being an enemy. If they need to use historical reasons that are fabricated, that they do use that. So they think of themselves as educated by being educated with a grudge. So the grudge justifies anything they can do against. So you're just like, hey, you're just like me. No, they're not like you at all. They see you as an enemy. You see them as a potential friend or a potential contemporary even. They don't see that. No, you're playing these games that they're playing because it's a shadoic projection that they're putting onto you, what they think themselves, what they would do in your position. This is how because they're locked in that egoic chamber that they're in. So that leads to people being surprised, like especially good people, like all the time being surprised, like how could they have done this? Like what were our interactions based on? Like what was the premise? And then you can see in retrospect the premise is completely different. You could call the secondary one naive. I think it fits. People are naive. People are naive. They're naive from birth. We weren't meant to be in enemy territory. We were born into, or we are sort of born to be in a family setting where everything is working and civilized. And yet, it's a rather naive expectation, isn't it? But if you think about the out of controlness in the world, where you had like a preeminent cultural capital like Kiev, the Paris of the East, being vassalized by some Genghis Khanian ruffians from some far province that had a more autocratic way of government. See, this is the problem. Like, if you have a lot of cultural people, a lot of talented people, they're not always focused with power grabbing and subjugating other peoples, but authoritarians are. Like militaristic societies. Now, you could say, again, that maybe, of course, you need a certain amount of militarism, but once a neighbor adopts a certain amount of militarism, you have to match that. If you get overmatched, they'll use that because they've got a militaristic way of seeing things. Not because you want them to think differently. Well, you want them to think differently, but it's not going to change the way they think. So it's not their fault. They feel that you have misunderstood them. They feel you haven't put in your homework. And to be truthful, it's true. You should not interact with people or different countries unless you're very well informed about where they're coming from, what they believe, and don't take people at face value. People outside your cultural groups, don't take it at face value. There's a lot of public relations going on to make people look better than they are, because they know it works. So they're selling themselves to the West to infiltrate the West, to undermine the West. And it's worked better than they possibly expected because of this naivete of Westerners. But those days are over, in my opinion. They died out. So we live in a new world that should be less naive, and it's not a bad thing that it is. Again, idealism, it's deceptive because it appears to be good, but it isn't. So that the delusional factor is often a big part of idealism. Oh, and let's not forget, they have a version of idealism as well, which is also a part of an alternative reality. We're going to save the world. The world's going to be a utopia, right? They have that part. So if they want to move from one part of their alternative reality to the other part, they can seamlessly without any cognitive dissonance. So no matter how many horrible things they did, how many people they injured, everything else, it was all for the greater good. They can just sunset themselves with that idea. And they do believe in reinforcing that with rituals, where they show themselves as being the parts of the heroic past that they've fabricated for themselves. Want others to believe it. That's why they tell the tale, tell it to others and to themselves. And anybody who brings up the facts, that person is a drone, right? Is somebody factual, archaeological, linguistic, cultural, peer-reviewed information. That beep, red alert. It's an alternative reality grenade that can blow up an alternative reality that they're living in. So, but that's the question. How many of them have the integrity to leave behind that alternative reality and see it for the manipulative, complex, pathogenic, asymmetric perspectives that it is? How many can have the integrity and leave it just behind to get out of the spaceship once that grenade goes off, to just ditch it and rejoin the Western civilization? Because that's the other thing, they're divided. They have all different types of ethnicities. They don't like each other. If one group will do something to have something over the other group, they'll all do it. So it's not necessarily like a happy family of Confederates. So that's also a reason why they adopted a lot of these brutish decapitation programs, cultural programs. Because for them, it's about ruling. It's not about letting people self-actualize, not their citizenry. That's not really a concept they share. They have serfry and manorial lords. That's the way they see it. Even though they have no real valid claims. Although it would be funny to see what self-rationalizations they have in this day and age for thinking of themselves as heirs to some type of imperial culture. But once they're in the alternative reality universe, they probably have some very convoluted connections why they're the third Rome, because what does Rome have to do with Moscow? Except that it was some type of idea, some type of aggrandizement that they thunked up for themselves in the bushes and swamps on the periphery of nowhere. So, what do they call that? I mean, pride. I think pride is a word. I just stay away from it. But something like a self-aggrandizement, I think, is another part you shouldn't underestimate. So, and then we get to the Asiatic banditry, which means contracts don't mean really anything. It's like, think of just dealing with the Indians. Like Indian giving, like that's sort of a big part of it too. So they'll Indian give you in a white monkey game, because that's what they do on the Asiatic steppes. And so you're surprised, see, because you're coming from the colonist, the Anglo-Saxon colonist game, where you didn't have those types of people, because the Pacific Ocean cut them off, so we never dealt with them. But we did deal with Indians. We just didn't deal with the white monkeys, because there was, Chinese between the Indians and when I say Indians, I mean American Indians. Indians and Pakistanis, and now what is it, Khalistan? The Sikhs, Northern India. Yeah, that's a whole different game. Indian giving sort of applies to them too, but in a different way. A lot more tribalism involved. Very highly politicized cultures and societies that are highly complex, not necessarily what you think on the at first glance. They sort of have off-putting costumes on and whatnot. That's sort of a magic to make them look less conniving than they are. And people that are out loud with magic clothing, they're into a lot of different games that are not on your level, right? They're sort of on some different level. So it would be smart to know what type of level and figure out if it works for you or not. So that's what I'm saying. Don't take people at face value. Just don't. Take time to get to know people, and don't get to know the wrong type of people. And even if they're in the right type of place, they might have the wrong type of story. Keep that in mind. Quick note on Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat. Who knows how long this guy has been sitting in office, but one day was way too long. So who put him in office? Who are his backers? Who are his deputies? Who are his affiliates? Who are his friends? Who put him there? It's this dude. First off, his name sounds fishy to start with, But guess what? New Jersey, a great state in the United States. A lot of people have bad things to say, and there's been a lot of cultural misrepresentations of the state. The state itself is grand. It's great. It's a little piece of Africa. It's got beaches, it's got maritime culture, it's got a long history. There's a lot of civilization in New Jersey, at least there was before these people got in. People like Bob Menendez. They said he had $500,000 in cash or something lying around. Oh, and 100,000 in gold bars. He was walking around with a long-legged, boobied blonde, Lebanese woman that was apparently working as like a call girl in Egypt for the special police there. And this super simp, his head is like gigantic, and he's got this little small face. Something just, he looks like he thinks a lot more about things than other people. And apparently he has, because he was flaunting in a shiny Mercedes too. And so, but he was on all different types of different committees, foreign committees, so he was privy to insider information. He started passing that off to very shady corners of the world. And that's finally what caught up with there was a super simp video of him singing to this lovely Lebanese lady of unknown provenance in India in front of the Taj Mahal. There's this super simping with and thinking, and just he's so high on life because those gold bars that shine. He turns on a UV lamp in the morning and lets the UV bounce off the gold before he goes in front of the nation and starts making proposals about this and that. And then just think, okay, as ridiculous as that is, think if you had a really competent senator and said the position he took, the opportunity cost of that, try to fathom that, even as a normal person. Like let's give you some example that you could possibly like do a comparison. So in an important position, let's say, okay, instead of like the chief surgeon of an operating ward that really did know what he was doing and was saving lives day in and day out, came into work more or less on time. I mean, nobody's perfect. But he saves, let's say within his tenure of, how many years was this guy in? If it's 10 years, just think of that, 10 years a surgical ward. So everything's set up, electricity set up, best equipment, best personnel, or at least that's what it should be. And people are just dying every day, but because no, this good surgeon is saving lives. But then there's an election, and then Bob Menendez comes in. Because why not Bob Menendez? He heard that he could make money being a chief surgeon, and because it's an election and he doesn't lose elections, he wins elections because he knows how to win elections, even if it's to misrepresent his positions. I'm going to make everybody rich. Maybe he comes out and says that. Winning votes doesn't have to mean tampering. There doesn't have to be a conspiracy with the voting mechanism to win a vote based on, let's say you have $100 million and a state terror actor behind you, like the entire strength of their state, because they want to get you in, because they want the information that you can give them, so that they can rook everyone else, your entire country, out of freedom and opportunity and prosperity, long or short term. The shorter the term, the better for them. And so the real surgeon, he didn't have all that public relations behind him, so he was voted out of his constituency. But Bob Menendez comes in, and he doesn't know the first thing. First off, he might not be there 3 days out of the week. And when he's there, he's got very little time and very little patience for real problems. Like, okay, how can we get this done in the next 5 minutes? Because I'm on my way to a 7-course meal with my my proud wife here, the mega gold digger of the universe. So let's make this quick. Let's make this snappy. I'm a very important person, don't you know? You probably don't, but I have 500,000 in cash sitting around. So my time is really valuable. So then just imagine, people are dying left and right. There was the grandmother, or that came in with her only grandchild, her grandson, who was supporting her as a roofer. And his leg is shattered, and he needs immediate medical attention. Bob Menendez is nowhere to be found. The kid dies in the waiting room. Now times that by tens of thousands, and then because there's no direct connection between old Swift Bob and these things happening, then it just sort of carries on as sort of a new normal under his leadership, which are definitive of his values, which are self-enrichment and otherwise non-existent. Just doesn't make a blip. Somebody thinks it's like a high level of trolling. It's like, it's so not caring that it's like funny to them, that you would think that he would be in there and putting his scrubs on and taking his position seriously. He's just playing the position. It's an official position. And this is, again, coming from the East. This is Leninism. In effect, there was a documentary I saw about their famous black market, right? Soviet Union was really well known for black markets because officially nothing could work. Which is, again, it's a racket. It's a racketization of the economy. Nothing about that surprises racketeers. They're like, okay, yeah, sure, of course, that makes sense. Then that's where they come in as the middleman. Well, they were selling up official positions. You want to be the top cop in Baku? No problem. Just pay up 100,000 rubles or something. You want to be a director, or you want to be a chief prosecutor? 500,000 rubles. Just pay it, and that's it. That's what you get. So if they had it there, and there's, and you see how racketeers work. Racketeering, you should look that word up. Just read the whole Wikipedia thing. There's a lot of different things involved in it. And once you see that so complex groupings, you can start seeing, okay, well, how would state actors use this for their own benefit? How would they use it to achieve geopolitical goals? See, and this is something, again, this is next level thinking that catches the racketeers by surprise, because they're just money people. And they understand, okay, I get money for trading influence, but they don't grasp the strategic, let's say, angle. Like, they don't grasp the exterminationist, or if they do, some of them might actually grasp it. And because they're psychopathic nihilists, they don't care. Like, okay, so what? When I'm dead, it's all over. Game over. Until then, this is the way I got this, and I like this, and therefore I rationalize that this is good what I did, even if it is flush my entire country, culture, everything down the tubes. So, as disturbing as that is, that's another reason why it's very important in free and open societies to have a free press, to expose these people, because you cannot be in politics if you disgrace yourself like that. Because why? You're a security liability. That's what it is. It's a performance liability. And on down the line. If you want to get abstract about it, you could just say malign influence, but one that is very damaging compared to other malign influences. Right? The person screaming at you for some reason that isn't true is a malign influence on your life. Someone like this, who is in a extremely responsible position, not just for his constituency, his state, his country, but for the entire free Western world. Because free peoples really are all in this together. But guess what? One Bob Menendez did not bring the system down. The system brought him down. Finally, he was exposed. And now, he's a textbook example. He'll go down in history as one of the worst examples of banditry in this time. He might even become typical, depending on how long he was active, and his people. Remember, it's not just isolated to the one; it's the whole group of people, the whole mechanism, the whole campaign. think of it as campaign. Yeah, campaign from who? So apparently, yeah, again, this Lebanese woman, which again, Lebanon is in the Ottoman zone, and the Ottomans have been super active in the last 30 years, oddly enough. Uh, she was, yeah, busy then also in Egypt, another part of the Ottoman Empire. So I get it. Stupid people, they like to have one-track minds, and they like to say, "Oh, we're not getting attacked by multiple vectors, multipolarity." But unfortunately, no. It's a little bit next level now. We're not in the 1950s, unfortunately. However, why should I say unfortunately? Why get sentimental about something? I think the future is going to be a lot better than the 1950s. It's going to be great. It's going to be magical. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be nothing like they thought we would end up. And so sometimes there are some good things that can happen. Look, it's just, even if you think of it in terms of yin and yang, bad can't be at the top forever. It can't. In fact, it has a lot not going for it. And as I said, the causality, bad things happen. Who made those things happen? That person is bad by definition. Now, of course, things can turn out unintentionally, and that's something you need to inspect for authenticity. But if you find an imposter instead of authenticity, and even in some cases, some people might be authentically sorry that they got played. But it doesn't matter. It's not enough to be sorry in certain positions of responsibility, which is why they are not recommended for everyone. You should not take a responsible position unless you're willing to experience the consequences of failing your mandate. And not because of necessarily external factors, but from internal factors. But you have people like this, you have a culture that tolerates charlatanism, imposterism, substitutionism, racketeering. You're on the downward path to extinction. Because these competitors that we have that aren't being acknowledged, they see it that way. They see it as a zero-sum game, period. It's no shades of gray for them. They're either in control or they're not. Or they're getting in control, on their way to get control. And if you're out of that game, you're out your head in your clouds, you're thinking about climate change instead, the weather and other things, you're out to lunch. You're not in the real world. You're a goober. So, and yeah, look to these explainers, all these people that have university positions now, especially in the West. A lot of them got there via Leninist machinations that weren't recognized as such. Certainly it's true. How many Westerners are opening their big yaps and pontificating about what they think China is to large, unwashed audiences of Chinese students? How many do you think they are? But on our side, we got Chinese people popping up talking about human rights and how they need to be specifically this way from a Western perspective because that's better for them. Oh, but no, it's not better for them. It's better for humanity if it's that way. It would be better if just the West went away, but in a dignified way that they define as dignified, with a lot of omissions, a lot of deflections, a lot of clever presentations. So, yeah, more than a pinch of salt. It shouldn't be tolerated because, again, just like Bob Menendez, took over that position. The real tragedy is not that he was just a greedy person, but that again, the person he replaced during that time could have been so much better. Could have been an Andrew Jackson, but because he was there, Andrew Jackson is still working on the farm. And during that time, all that the terrible things that happened and mistakes and people forgetting this and doing that because they figured this out, uh, all that didn't happen. See, for that to happen, that would have been a nightmare. But oh, we did have that nightmare. But maybe we'll have the dream, but we'll have the dream if we allow the right leadership to get to the right places and prevent frauds like Menendez taking up spots, boosting themselves where their incompetence should have them removed. And yet, again, how long was he tolerated? I mean, what level of mess up did he have to do to finally, for someone to finally pull the trigger on this? And how long did that take, and why did that take so long? So we got, again, institutions, World Health Organization, the only reason why it came out that the whole institution is a flim-flam is because of COVID-19. Had COVID-19 been delayed by 10 years, the whole world would just be assuming that it's a valid functioning institution. We got all these security institutions, all these big wigs that can't figure out who the hell what a fraud looks like, and take care of business. Like, what level of fraud do they already tolerate? And see, this is the thing about wise guys, is that they all think that they're not going to get strategically rogue. So coming back to different rackets. There was Tammany Hall in New York City. It's a historical fact. And it's just the way, it's a vulgar way in which politics can be carried out. And I'm all about taking the vulgarity out of politics. I do not believe that politics should be vulgar. I absolutely don't. I think vulgarity should be excluded from politics. It should be spotted and excluded. And I do believe it can be done. Just like you can have a great venue, there's no riffraff coming through the door, it's well managed, the food is spot on, the cleanliness is spot on, the equipment, the decor is spot on, the other guests are spot on. You can have that in politics too. And if we care about how we entertain ourselves, why wouldn't we care about how we defend ourselves? How we evolve out of sadistic, sadomasochistic, and wasteful and wrong ways of doing things into the right ways of doing things, which leads to a lot more prosperity and better times. People are not getting agitated about random nonsense. They've got a lot of time for themselves. They've got a lot of peace. They've got a lot of relationships and business relationships and everything else that work. Why? Because the bad actors don't get into the system, and if they do, they get ejected quick. So imagine you have this great dinner. Everybody is having a great time. Some clown jumps up, starts screaming about something. And it doesn't make sense. So it's not one of these rare cases. We like to heroicize the loudmouth. The loudmouth often doesn't have something useful to say. There's nothing that the loudmouths can scream out in an inappropriate time that can't be written on as a letter in a cogent way that you can take several pages if you want to. Take multiple pages. Put that letter and address it to one or several people. And now we're even talking in a digital age. You can make a petition And that people can then read that petition when it is convenient for them. Isn't that a more skillful way of delivering things? And if you make no sense at all, then why should you have had the right to disturb everyone's civilized meeting? Well, you don't. But then how do you go back in the time machine and repair the damage you do? Well, you can't. And then you have to weigh, well, was your belief or wrong belief in the rightness of your position enough of a reason to have destroyed a moment of time that is unable, you cannot recreate, that's lost? And then you think, well, what is the value, potential value of the loss? And then are you in a position to repay the loss that you have committed? And then it's probably, if you tally it up, the computer's going to punch out the answer, no, it's impossible to repay. You don't have enough. It's not just digits in your bank account. You don't have the time to give back in qualitative terms. So, but then what to do in that instance? So, but again, the best thing to do is not to focus on the punishment of bad actors. It's more important to think in terms of making sure they don't get to that point to be able to make something bad that is important. And again, if you did have a well-administered venue, maybe the outbreak would have lasted 3 seconds, and then that person is taken from the dining area and everyone gets back to their business. Because things like that can happen. Nobody knows who's who necessarily in a public venue. You don't. The guy, and then you have a question afterwards, who was this guy? They say, well, he had all of his stamps, or he looked okay. He had some nice small talk. There's nothing sketchy about him at all. Okay, things can happen. Now, if that's not the case, and the guy has a story, well, then you've got another problem, that the people that are vetting people don't know what they're doing. So in a way, it's also naive to think that the free press can solve this problem by vetting candidates, especially if they're going in it with deception from the outset. But that's what we need to educate the public. Say, look, there's these types of people do exist. So this is how you should be looking. You should be asking a few more questions and also having a few more ways of checking whether or not they are working towards their mandate or not. He said he was going to build this bridge. Bridge still not built. It's 2 years later. What's happening? And then explanations come. But, is that credible? It sounds like a likely story. And it's not like likely stories weren't told in this time of imposterism, so ergo, I'm going to limit the badness of this actor to his 2-year term. And it should be considered a catastrophe. It should be considered like a robbery, or worse, a subversion. But it just, look, we're not living in that perfect world. I'm still looking around for the pearly gates. Even though I don't get myself into a rage about everything, we're not living in a perfect world. So, but compassionately, people can admit, hey, we were tricked. We thought this guy would do it. He didn't deliver. We got to find a new one. Or maybe you can do it. You don't have to look. Can you do it? Why can you do it? It shouldn't be because you think you have an ego. It's because you think you can perform. Imagine that, saying, all right, Who wants to be a high diver here? Most people, you see, they'd say no. And then you say, all right, who wants to be a president or who wants to be a senator? Oh, all hands go up. What? Being a high government representative it should be a high skill. It is also highly responsible. So let's get back to the high diver. The high diver is taking up an extreme situation, and if he does not execute, he can also get seriously injured. It's a dangerous profession. It's a dangerous sport. Which brings me, I'm going to take a slight aside because I've thought of it just now. Look, when I grew up, boxing was big. Now there were, of course, subversive things going on there, and the sport is probably, I stopped following it at some point, but in any case, boxing has rules, so it is not barbaric. Now, what happened in my time is boxing, well, of course, got subverted by the usual, business interests. And then the MMA thing came. See, but the difference is, okay, now boxers also, a lot of them have physical injuries later. But some of them, a large proportion of them, however, did not get seriously injured because of the rules. Now, MMA is a different can of worms. Now, on the one hand, I appreciate that it is, or at least, okay, the current iteration of it might not be that way, but I do understand that it is no BS. I understand that. That principle I respect. But what I don't like is that it's become as popular as it has. And a lot of guys are getting injured with that. And that's not something that survivor bias is exposing. We're talking guys with serious, significant, life-altering injuries. And not just only physical, but also cognitive. A lot of these guys get knocked out like that. It does something with their neural networks, like fuses them together, and also if they're also angry people to begin with. These guys will get into a road rage incident and kill 3 people before being gunned down, and it's related to the concussion type syndrome that for example NFL players had for a while. It's just worse. They're not wearing helmets. Figure that one out if you're a genius. So I do believe that should be disbanded for the sake of the athletes and for the sake of society. It's menacing. But again, that was just an aside. I don't think politics should be a blood sport either. And that's the other thing. We've been redefining masculinity into these barbaric directions that are not reciprocating. They're damaging. There needs to be more reciprocity. And that's what politics should also be about. So people come in, I'm the competitor, I want to be number one, I'm going to knock out my opponent. That's not the person you want in politics. So what might work in MMA does not work in other places, and for good reason. But if you are that doesn't mean you shouldn't go in, but you need to leave that behind you. You need to evolve as a person. So if you got into that or into all these other toxic subcultures that lead to that, hey, gym culture, a lot of it's toxic. Back in the day, it was about iron. Today, what it's like bizarre social engineering. Also, women in gyms, no. It's all of it. It just this whole thing it's messed up, and it's also, I want to say, dangerous for them. They think, oh, everybody's doing it. I was told this is a new way of doing things. Don't believe the hype. It's a setup. Those gyms that attract a lot of unsavory people in a lot of regards, which is why when people were pumping iron, they weren't in. They knew where they were, and the other people there knew who was who, and they also didn't mess with each other unnecessarily, or if they did, there was some serious consequences. But you didn't have people, women walking around with spandex and whatnot. That's just crazy. Nothing about that can go right. So also coming back to women in general, look, the more relationships you have, it is baggage. So don't get hooked up early. Don't get hooked up with just anybody. And also don't keep hooking up with just random dudes, because it does affect you psychologically and not for the better. Now, I understand some are just, beyond whatever, but then accept that. You're beyond whatever. You're not going to be that person. And like the housewife, what have you. Well, then do let people know that up front. Don't play like you're not that thing when you are. Okay, you are. Which is okay. Look, anybody can do, everyone has to own up to their own karma. But what gets me is when young girls get on the wrong path early. So that's why I'm telling them. Not necessarily talking to you. Okay, everyone gets their own causality for what they do. I'm advising against it. And then if you find a dude, stick with him. It's a team effort. If that guy's getting up every day and you're not, maybe you can pack his lunch the night before, or if his shoe is ripped, maybe you can go shopping that day and make sure he gets a new pair of boots. Or maybe he likes those boots, so you're going to get him a new pair as a substitute, and then you're going to send his old pair to a real expert on repair, and then his repaired boots are going to come back, and then he's going to have those as well. You're going to be checking the shoelaces to see if there's a rip in one. You're going to replace it without him having to tell you to do it. The house is going to be clean, orderly. The groceries are going to be where they should be. And hygiene. There's going to be cleanliness on yourself and those around you, including any children. And children, here's the thing, they're your responsibility. You pump them out. They're your kids. So don't expect him to be running around like a nanny. That's really annoying. A lot of these so-called neo-barbarian women that think that all that needs to be shared. No. We have completely different psychologies in that regard. That doesn't mean we can't interact with children, but we're not built to be as patient or as meticulous or as specialized as you are. You are literally naturals. You are the naturals. That is something that, again, men can do to a certain extent, but it's just not the same. So it is a talent too. Without you, no human race in a way. But the big mouths amongst you that have all the ideas, don't believe it. In fact, you need to start ostracizing the purveyors of Leninism amongst women. You need to be able to spot them, and you need to be able to cut them out of whatever life you're living or social circles or whatnot. And you know what? If you have a family, that's easy, but it's nice if you're in contact with sisters and aunts and mothers and grandmothers that share some common values in that regard, and not the Leninist values. Now, you can come from a bad family, a wrecked family, and you can create a new family on this tried and true model. But it's a lot better if you never were exposed to all of these anti-family measures. So, and again, there's a lot of public relations. You can do anything. You can become everything. Blah blah blah. It's not. It's a gas. It's a laughing gas. It's a crying gas. It's a misleading gas. So now that may be, and I'm talking to the wind, but if one, that's enough for one lady out there to become a lady, it's certainly worth it that I said that. Don't let the words I just said bounce off you or be misunderstood or taken off on some tangent. It's better for you, it's better for other people, it's better for the world that way. Coming back to the Menendez thing, though, for a second, the important thing to note, not just that he was a senator from New Jersey, but he was a Democratic senator. Now, Joe Biden was also a Democratic senator of Delaware. It's actually not very far from New Jersey. You can drive there by car in a couple of hours. So, just to give you some context, now, one of the stupidest things I heard by one of these talking heads of a think tank NGO that came out of Western academia or academician circles was that the Republicans were more pro-Putin because they want a strong authoritarian leader. This is not true. We have to remember, Putin is a Leninist, like the chief one. So they're thinking in Leninist terms, like this authoritarian personality. This was a theory that was injected into the West, which was Leninist in origin, oddly enough. So we're looking for the big strong man. No, this is their projection of what they see happening when people are supporting, for example, Donald Trump. This is the other thing. The Democratic Party was mostly comprised of Leninists at this point. They took over the labor movements, more or less. And so the Democratic Party is pretty discredited on that regard, or in that regard. And there's many old Leninists sitting in the ranks. They're just undercover, you see, laying low. They never thought that there would be such an exposure of Eastern European Leninism to disrupt their shtick. But ultimately, they're on the same page as far as power grabbing goes and substituting and decapitating. So a lot of people, like, again, conservative people, now they say one of their tricks is to call themselves conservative when they're not conservative, because that's the only way that they'll win an election. But in fact, if you want to be euphemistic, you say they're center-left. Well, the left is Leninist, so center-Leninist, sort of, you know. But again, we're talking about a lot of stupid idiots, like, not stupid idiots, useful idiots. So the Leninists in the West aren't really comparable to the executioners in the East, although the ideological underpinnings and their methods of operation are quite similar, if not identical. So, and then if we also look, I don't want to get into partisan politics at all, but Biden was the vice president under Obama, so he's already been in 8 years, and then this is his coming out event these last 4 years. So we're talking 12 years, and then he's 40 years in as a senator. Term limits speak against him. The probability, especially how many times did he meet with Bob Menendez during his lifetime, for example? That'd be interesting to know. So, but again, Democrats, they have this weird ideological paradigm that they're in. And so, again, some of them, the chief ringmasters of their Chrome Torpedo group, have been pushing this narrative that oh yeah, these nationalists, they want a strong leader like Putin, because now they switch Putin, they put into the nationalist role. So see, it's anti-nationalist. But hell no, do any damn Republicans. I mean, there's a couple of agent provocateurs, but hell no, to no right-minded, right-thinking American wants any damn thing to do with a Putin-esque type figure. What are you talking about? It's ridiculous. The United States has had a culture of presidency since its inception. You can go back to George Washington. Was he the strong leader? Well, maybe he was. What's wrong with that? How about that? Why can't we have a strong, capable leader? Like, is there something wrong? Can somebody please tell me why that's a bad thing? Why is that evil? What is the connection between strong, good leadership and the world coming to an end? Because it's really emotive nonsense that they use in place of an argument. It's political filler. It's like, look, I don't know. They're framing it. Just think of it like a straight man comedian or something. It's a version of comedy. They're framing it as this insidious possibility that it's a way of mudslinging, perhaps, or how do they say that? Misrepresentation. It's a poisoning of someone else's. It's supposing that there's something wrong with the motives of the other side. There's a psychological dimension of good and evil, and they're casting aspersions. So it's all misattributed to Trump. Now, I'm not saying, look, Trump is not ideal. But what I'm saying is he's coming out of a party that's split by Toryists. So you got the greedy, valueless, psychopathic people. But then within those ranks are the people that feel like they have no other choice, because the Democrats have been brain dead since the 60s. And anybody that would dispute that is more or less a fool, because it's manifestly obvious. Like, I don't know what statistics they're looking at, but social statistics, they're not looking at that and claiming some type of success. The standards have gone down, not up, in the last 60 years. Now, certain standards for certain things, okay, but look at train travel, for example, real basic. And see, that's when you start getting into history, and that's when you start getting into alternative reality, and they're big in the alternative reality game. They have alternative histories. Oh no, that was all the bad times. We're heading now towards the new times. They're big into these historical misrepresentations. So again, I get it. I mean, look, nobody is necessarily 100%. Certainly not in this political landscape, but making those types of false equivalencies, it's embarrassing and stupid, and you need to start identifying the so-called experts that are misrepresenting things in that way. They're also setting up the frame that they're going to acknowledge the radical elements that are most likely agents, saboteurs, and phonies anyway, and make them the big issue instead of the base that is the big issue. The base of people that have nowhere else to go because they've contaminated the entire political environment with hateful ideological frames. And racketeering. I mean, Bob Menendez, he's part of the crew. Like, again, he was a big part of it. You don't get a senator. There's 2 senators from New Jersey. There's 50 states or whatever. There's 100 senators. That means he's 1% of the entire institution. A very important part of a very populous, important state. So is that an indicator? Do you understand now why people are not very happy with the situation? So if you want to compare someone to Putin, actually Biden is more of a Putin than Trump. Because how about this? Trump did step down. 4 years ago, he didn't hold on to power. Biden was not his Medvedev, right? But Biden's been behind the scenes that whole time, 40 years in. He's a 40-year lifer. So again, but this gives him pros, it gives him some advantages and some disadvantages, doesn't it? Like he has a certain subtlety to him. I'm not saying he's all bad. That's the thing. I think even if he's 40% good, that 40% is indisputable. But when taken on the whole, especially if he's the head representative of his party and those are the people he rolls around with, look, this is why there are term limits. This is why they recycle them out. That means 10 years max, 15 retire. Why are you in so long? Why do they do that? Somebody could write in the comments, why do politicians that somebody has something on them, why do they stay in till the end? Is it what is the combination of factors? And why is it bad for democracy? That's also something you can answer as well. I seem to have an inkling why that would be. But maybe you have some ideas as well, so do write that down in the comments. But yeah, so all these people smack talking Trump and all that to Eastern Europeans, these people are, again, very highly suspect if they're going to get in under that partisan game, playing people off. Finally, I mean, whether or not I personally like Biden or not is really irrelevant. He represents the office of the presidency, and whoever is representing that office, it's the office that's really the most important thing. And so I do understand there's a lot of problems these days, but finally there should be, if it can be solved in a civilized way, it would be much better than the other way. But we just don't know at this point. We're in uncharted territories. But the sign, for example, that there's an institution working to get rid of people like Menendez, that's a positive sign. So we just have to take it one day at a time and not hope for the best, but have a certain faith that the good will win out in the end.